Hello, nature journalers. My name is Bethany Milam, an artist, teacher, and nature journaler. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. If you would like to join one of my live online classes, then you can follow the links below as well. There we go. So, welcome to Creative Nature Journaling. What we are going to be looking at this time is having a look along the seashore. So have in mind that this is, although we're online, probably sitting in our houses, this is a little exploration of ways that you can nature journal on the beach, while you're there or after a visit, if you prefer to do it that way. So I'm going to give you some different things to look at and sort of take you through, hopefully, something that you will find useful for creating your own nature journaling pages. So first of all, before we get into it, I'd like to invite you to take a moment, oops, there you go. I will pause that a moment. Take a moment to use the video if you want to, or just close your eyes and imagine yourself on the beach. Think about the last time you visited a beach, went rock pooling. Maybe you've got a favorite beach that you want to think about, or sort of the closest coastline to you. Whatever it is, think about what you can see, what you could hear, what you could touch, taste, smell. And if you want to, you can write down some words to describe the memory or the experience. So we'll just take a few moments to calm down and put ourselves on the beach. So just imagine yourself, what would you be seeing on your little stretch of coastline? What kind of sounds would you be hearing? Think about things that you could touch. So, are you on sand or pebbles? Are there rocks? Is there lots of seaweed? Um, what kind of tastes would be around? So it might be the saltiness in the air. It might be that you're thinking, oh, I like an ice cream. Um, and what could you smell? So is there a very seaweed-like smell? Or are there other smells on your beach? So I did a little bit of this earlier, and I've just put a sort of stream of consciousness, what I'm thinking as I was trying to come up with a memory. So I've written calm, go slow, no rush, wind, sun, and the rush of breaking waves teasing my toes, then retreating. The blue, expansive horizon turns to a dramatic sky with tall white clouds and warm sun. Sand, cold water, pebbles, and seaweed underfoot. Salt on the air, sun cream, and the promise of ice creams later. So if you've come up with just a list of words, or you've tried to put some order into that, absolutely anything is fine. There's no right or wrong. Okay, so the first thing we're going to put down on our page is a little bit of metadata, and this is going to help us start to set the scene. So again, if you have a particular beach or shoreline in mind, you might want to do a little bit of looking up information as we go along. So if you have a particular area, you might want to write that down. I have written down two places. So these are on screen now. The first one is West Wittering Beach, that's on the south coast. And then I've also got Balmoris, which is a beach in Anglesey, North Wales. And what I've done is I've written down the high tide and the low tide times this evening. So this is a little bit of a mishmash, I have to say, but it gives you an idea of what information you could include if you're doing this at a particular time for a particular beach. So this is not the times at the time I visited. These are today's times, and high tide and low tide. But it gives you an idea. It might be good information to note down. And alongside that, I've also taken a note of the moon phase because that can also have a big impact on the tides. So again, that is today's moon. But again, you just have a little think. This is kind of information you might want to put down. So I've got the date and the weather alongside that as well. And again, that is what I've looked up for right now. So let's have a look now. So I'm going to just move my mouse. It's being awkward. So let's try and put it back and see if it behaves. Yep. Okay, so another thing that you can do is when you're setting the scene is to actually draw a scene. So you can have a little landscape or landscapeito. So we are going to do a little box, and then you can choose either one of the beaches on the screen, or if you've got a quick access to another image, you can choose your own. And have a little go at just placing in some main elements. So I'm going off to North Wales because I quite like the rock formation we've got in here. And if you know me, you know I love my mountains. So we've got mountains as well. What could be better than a beach next to mountains? Hey? That's something special. Oops. There we go. So just very quick little sketch, little scene. If you want to put color into it and more detail, then of course you can do. And if again I could remember, I would also make a note of the direction that we're looking in. So is this facing north, east, south, or west? Honestly, I don't know anymore. But this is something where if you were nature journaling and you were doing this, then you could write that information down and then you wouldn't be stuck here going, I don't know. Okay, so any other little notices that you are seeing about your stretch of beach or coastline? So you could make notes about the wind, because that's a little bit more difficult to convey. So wind direction, is it windy? You can also note down any little observations that you have about the scene. And again, if there are particular landmarks, you could maybe try and label some of the in this case, the mountains, the peaks in here. that we're seeing in the distance. But anything like that just sets us there and lets us know where we are exactly, what's going on, and creates a bit of interest. So if you wanted to put color into this, you could do. If you just wanted to stick with black and white pencil sketch, that's fine. And what you can do if you're keeping to the black and white is to think about putting in some shading or some hatching so that you're creating a little bit of tone. And so you take notice what is very dark, what is lighter, and then we can hopefully get a sense of depth and perspective into our scene as well. Okay, so let's come back up onto the cliffs and have a look also at the flora, so the plant life that is around. And I have to say, one of my favorite seaside plants is this thrift or sea pinks. So again, you could put the whole scene in, or you could just focus in on the flowers themselves. Either way, it's quite fun to actually put them in a box, and that is a very wonky box. I can't even draw straight today. Oh dear. um, but never mind, we're going to go with that. And let's have a look at the structure. So I'm going to do a vague shape with a few little squiggly edges, not making my lines solid. And again, if we go for a few different sizes, we can give a sense of depth and some overlaps maybe. Have a look at where they are, slightly different shapes, where these petals are coming out, or there's little gaps in certain places. And also have a look at the bulbs or the flowers that have gone over. Notice some more shapes in what you're seeing. And of course, we don't need to do all of them, but you can give yourself just a few so that you've got an idea of what is happening and the different stages that they are at. And then we can put a little bit of colour in if you want to. So this pink is quite an interesting color. Going towards a magenta. So I have an Inktense pencil that I'm going to use in combination with some water. If I put the water down first and then draw into that, I can keep some texture and some white spaces. Whereas if I shade first and then put water over that, I can again go over the top of it again when it's dry and put the texture in as a separate layer. So I can still do it when it's wet. So again, you can play with materials you've got. If you're just using ordinary colored pencils, that's fine. If you've got watercolor, whatever it is, it's just there to take note of the color. And I think I'm a bit darker than I wanted it to be, even though it looks darker on screen than what I'm seeing. So again, you can play with having, if it's not going to match that pencil, what else could we use? So I might experiment with a few different colors. But this one is too light. It's got a little bit too much of a orangey red base to it. So if I mix that with a bit of magenta, we might get something that looks a little bit more like the color I'm seeing. And again, this is putting the color on the actual flowers, but you could also do swatches of color by the side. And so if you've got a mixture of colors, you can go, right, this one and this one together make that. Have a look. Have you noticed where the sepals are underneath the pink flowers? How much they show depending on which direction the flower is facing. And also there is a little bit of brown at the top of the stalks. There's a little sheath. Okay, so let's make our way back down to the beach. And as we're going, something else that is helpful when you are somewhere that is as busy as a beach, and you're going to be seeing lots and experiencing lots, is to actually make yourself a species list. So if you see some birds mammals, insects that you want to take notice of, but you don't have time to get everything down. You can just make a list of what you've seen. So it could be that you're putting them all together or splitting them up into sort of birds, mammals, insects, etc. So I'm just going to write species seen, and then I would give myself some bullet points ready to go. So on screen now we have a turnstone, and we have a black-headed gull. And again, this is where you've got a lot going on, you haven't got time to draw everything. You can just put those into your list. But if you wanted to at a certain point go, oh, okay, I've not seen anything else, but I'm still seeing that black-headed gull walking about, then you could go in, and I'm going to do a little sketch next to my list and just do a quick sketch of that little character. So I'm first of all looking at the shape at the top of the head, down the back. Look at the negative shape to help you get that neck and back put in. Have a look at how the feathers are all sticking up in different directions down here. It might look a little bit scruffy. This was quite a windy day. I took this photo. There we go. Again, have a look at under the beak. Where does the neck to the body come in comparison to the head? So how far is the chest sticking out? And then how rounded do you want the underneath your bird? The legs, have a look at how far forward or how far back they are placed. So the foot that our gull is standing on should have the foot under the center of gravity. And I've got 1 foot under sand and 1 foot lifted. And of course you want to take notice of any markings on the birds that you're seeing. So I've outlined the wing here, and I could just say this is grey. I can mark in the black areas on these tail feathers and a little bit into the primaries that are hiding in here. And then the black head is actually quite grey. So this is either a very young gull or this is going into winter plumage. So I might do a few little dots and again make a note of it being mostly grey. So if I was doing quick sketches, it would be something like that. Don't have time to put in all of the details. And of course, you always got the risk of the bird flying away halfway through. So you want to get in the shape first, and then you can write down details about colour after the bird has flown off, if you can still remember that. So I can go, all right, red legs, and not spend too much time on that one. Okay, so now the bird's flown away. We are looking into the rock pools. So I did like the photo on the top here, where you've got the underwater view and the above water view, which is quite fun. So if you want to, again, do a very quick little sketch of one of the scenes, have a little think about exploring into our rock pools and what you're going to start to find here. So again, I'm keeping to my little boxes, but you might want to go bigger, that's fine. I find that having a little border, having a little box does help with placing things in a interesting composition, keeping things a little bit more contained when you're doing smaller sketches. So I'm going to have a look at the main shapes, look at where we've got our water line and then our above water line. And then these most foreground rocks. And then once I've got those placed in, it makes it much easier to try and place the rocks and the shapes behind that. And if your box happens to be a slightly different ratio to what you're seeing on screen, that's where things become a bit more tricky. So I might just cut that down a bit. I'll make that into the title part. There we go. Rock balls. Again, if you are drawing from life, it doesn't matter what size box you draw, because you draw whatever you're seeing into that box. So if that rock continued up, I would continue up with it and maybe have some extra sky. Okay, let's have a look underneath. So where is the base of this rock? Can you just make it out? It's a bit dark and murky. You can see that. I can see this one continuing here. Another bit there. The little rock sitting down on the bottom. And a flat, large rock leading us in this way. And again, this is where you can decide how much drawing you want to do and whether you want instead to start describing and labeling what you are seeing. So if you are getting a little bit uptight with, oh, I've got to draw a rock. How do I make that look like that shape, like it's 3D? Or the seaweed is difficult. How do I get that look like it's going up the side or the algae, all of that? This is where you can let go because it's nature drawing, it's not fine art. You can come in and go, I'm going to label this. And the moment you go in and go, this is seaweed or algae, it takes the pressure off. It's no longer a precious drawing. It's a diagram. It's something you can label, add words to. So under the water, I'm just going to put in some hatching. Maybe cross hatch it a little. So this is a bit blurry, a little bit grayed out to what's happening above, which I can make a little bit sharper and have higher contrast between light and dark. So it's going to look like it's clearer as opposed to the areas that are under the water. And as you're drawing, you might spot more and more things. You might be interested in different kinds of information. So you might want to make notes of the types of rocks you're seeing if you're a little bit into geology. You might see a fish swimming by and take note of that. You might start noticing different types of seaweed and algae and the colors and the species. Again, it might be that you're really interested in the movement of light and shade over the water. So you might want to pay more attention to that area. We get a little bit of an idea of our rock pools, where we are and what's happening in that environment. Okay, so let's have a little look at some seaweed. So I don't know very much about identifying different species of seaweed, but in here we've got some different types of rack. We've also got some, I believe, green algae. And so what I find interesting is all of the different colours and shapes and textures that there are going on. So even if you don't know much about what you're seeing, you can't identify it just for yourself. This is where if you start journaling it, you can start to make sense of it later on when you come back to a subject, or you can just leave it as a mystery and just take note of what it is you're seeing. You don't have to find all the information. So have a look at some colours. I think that would be fun for this. And I would sort of think about, okay, what am I interested in? There's a lot going on the screen. So what little areas are you interested in? You can pull out little parts, or you can just take a bit of the layered image and have an explore of that. Again, there's lots for you to choose from. So this is kind of mimicking what it's like when you're there and you're surrounded by bits of seaweed, you don't know what to draw. What's the most interesting bit? Can you pick out a few little areas that are going to be good to draw when there's a whole mishmash of things happening? So I'm going to start lightly using my yellows and then work my way towards the slightly darker colours. So again, I've got a light bright green, and I'm going to try and get this sort of twizzly effect of the almost fluorescent looking algae we've got here. And then let's come in with maybe a little bit more neutral green if I can find it. We'll just give a little green hint into these air sacs. So as I'm looking at building these up, I'm thinking about where are the shadows, where are the lighter areas, and using that to help me make these shapes look a little bit more 3D. Think about using some different textures as well, different types of mark making. So I'm going in with a little bit of a scribbly line into the center of this, making the edge of it also a bit sort of uneven, hopefully more natural looking. It's fun to sort of just look at all of the different kinds of textures and shapes that are happening. So if you've got a particularly shiny piece of seaweed, you might want to try leave some white gaps so that your the white of your paper is going to show through and create that kind of extra shiny feel to it. And as we always do with nature journaling, if you want to make notes or label anything as you're going along, then that is absolutely fine. You might be coming up with questions about um, your subject. You might be able to identify it, or you might be having a I wonder or I notice sort of thought that you can jot down. It might be as simple as just sort of taking a little bit of note of the kind of texture of different parts of what you're seeing. And if you're struggling trying to get something look shiny enough or um, gloopy and slimy, then again, you can just write that down. It doesn't have to all be done in the drawing itself. So I might make a note of how slimy this piece is looking by the side of it. So again, it's not taking everything that we're seeing, but we're pulling out a few interesting shapes, textures, little parts that we can focus in on a little bit more and sort of think about what it is that we're seeing. And sometimes these little sketches you can look back on and you can actually use them to help to identify what it was that you saw. Right. So let's have another look around our rock pool. And we might start to notice some different um, shells and creatures living in our rock pools. So I'm not going to pause to draw this one, but you can come back to the slide and add a drawing of it if you want to. I'm going to come on to some starfish. So this is a common sea star. So what are we noticing with this? First thing is it the shape or the colour that stands out to you? Because both of those go, woo, I'm interesting. So maybe have a little go at adding a sketch to start you off. And what I would do is when we're thinking about, and I've started here, what I would normally do is to think about where are each of those limbs going. what direction and how big are we going to go? And then I might think, okay, so how thick are they? If I've made this limb that long, how thick do I want it to be? I'll do a few dashes and then put the shape in. And you can either come around each of these legs and go, right, this is how thick it is going to start off. Or you can do one at a time, whichever you feel more comfortable with. And then we'll follow it down, getting thinner towards the end. Have a look at where they twist around. You can also look at the negative shapes in between. So is this shape the same as what we're seeing? If it's not, what's going wrong? Maybe this needs to be a little bit more rounded. Maybe this goes up a little bit more. So we can use the negative shapes to help get the positive shapes of our starfish correctly proportioned. So, the common starfish, you've got 5 arms, and it's normally a orangey kind of color, orangey pinky, I would say. um, and you'll notice that if you look more closely, there are lots of very pale spines all over. So that is something that might be a bit more difficult to put across in your drawing, unless you've got a white or pale color that you can put over the top of whatever media you're using. So if I was spending hours on this, I could draw around each of those spines and then leave them as the white paper or as a pale version of the color in some cases. But likelihood is that when you're nature journaling, you don't have hours and hours unless you're working from a photo after the fact. And so what I would do instead is if I had a white pen with me, my good old jelly roll, is I could go over the top of my colored pencil and add in the texture with that. And if I didn't have the white pen with me, I would just fall back on making a note of what I'm seeing with words, and using that as a reminder instead of trying to draw something that is maybe a little bit more tricky, especially with color pencils or watercolor. It's not so easy. You would need something like a white pen or some white gouache to put those on the top, unless you are spending hours going around each tiny little dot and leaving that as a white space. So what I'm doing in the moment is to just get a little bit more of a 3D feel by putting in a bit of shadow. I'm also noticing the color variations. So it does go a little bit more purpley in places. So I might come in and do a little bit more of color variation. Where is the color different? Do I need a bit of more yellow somewhere as well? The more you look at a subject, the more variation you're always going to see. Um, so it's fun to just think about color. What variations in color are we seeing? Where is that color variation? So the purple seems to be along the middle, and then it does get maybe a little bit more yellow along the top outer edge. And maybe just a little bit more sort of reddish orange as we head into the underside, which also helps to give the idea that this has a bit more tone. So we're looking at a 3D object. And of course you can do the whole star. I'm just focusing on two legs at the moment. And again, that's a good tip if you are short for time and you have quite a complicated subject that you want to draw, is just take a part of it. Don't try and add the texture or the color or the complicated detail to the whole thing. Focus on a small part of it and get the detail there, especially if it's something that is sort of very similar. So like the starfish, we're going to see the same pattern of color and texture over each limb. They're just in different positions. If you're looking at a flower and it's got several petals, again, that is going to be repeated. So you don't have to do color and texture and detail in the whole thing. You can leave some of it as a outline. So if you were coming in afterwards with some white, you can see hopefully that you can put in the small white dots quite well with the Jelly Roll pen. Again, the darker your color underneath, the more that they are going to show up. Have a look at the rows. Where are the dots? They do seem to sort of follow rows mostly, but they're not all going along the whole length. They tend to disappear down underneath. So we've got more diagonal rows apart from this central one. And it's not a single line, it's quite often a group. So I'm seeing a pattern, but I'm also seeing a bit of chaos in that pattern, especially as we get towards the tip. So that's also something to take notice of. This is the common sea star. And diameter, it can be between 10 and 30 centimeters full grown, so that is quite a big one. um, Going to be easy to spot. Average lifespan 10 to 5 years. It's quite interesting how long some of these marine creatures do live for. And you're going to find them in rock pools or out to sea at depths of at least 600 meters. Now, the sea stars are active predators, so they will eat different bivalves and mussels and clams, and they belong to the echinoderms, which means spiny skinned. So you can see where all of the spines sort of come into the family name or genus name. Is that family or genus? I haven't written that down, have I? So that includes starfish, sea urchins, sea cucumbers, and brittle stars. And what we're going to have a look at next, I believe, is a brittle star. I'm right. Okay, so this again, we've got lots of limbs going out from a central disc this time. So I'm going to start this one with the central disc shape. And again, I would sort of just notice where the limbs are coming out from. And because they go all sorts of different directions, it can be helpful to just have those dashes to start you off, and then you can follow the shape down wherever it's going. Um, Also, brittle stars, the name kind of suggests the fact that they are quite brittle in that their legs will break off very easily, which is a defense mechanism, and they will regrow their legs. So you can see this one, it's got a bit of a stump on this left-hand side. So I might start there because it's not as long. It's quite straight. And put in that shape. And again, I can make note of this limb is shorter, broken off at some point. And this brittle star is clinging onto a rock. So this limb is clinging on around the other side. So it might, if your if your creature is interacting with its environment, you might end up needing to draw some of the environment, in this case the rock. So have a little look at the pattern that you can see on the central disc shape. Something like that. Again, there's a lot of sort of subtle variation going in, but I'm seeing this kind of marking going into there. So the legs can be all sorts of different colors, but they are going to generally have stripes down them. Have a look at if you can see any sort of curvature in the stripes. So if we're looking straight down at like this, we're not going to see that much curvature, but a little bit of curvature in the striping will make your brittle star's legs look a little bit more rounded. So if we're thinking tube shape, and again, if we're taking lots of time on this, we could count how many stripes we're seeing along the length. I'm not going to do that. um, so it depends on how much time you are spending on your particular drawing. And again, if you are at the beach actually doing this in from life, then you're probably aiming for quick sketches that get an idea of what you're seeing without going into so much detail. So what I want to make note of is how spiny the legs are. So I'm going to come in now with some dashes either side. And again, if I'm spending longer on this, I might put in a background color and then put the lighter color spines over the top of that background. But I'm going to, with this one, just stick with drawing them with pencil. And then what I'll do is I'll make a note by the side that the spines on the light sections are also light colored. And this is again where your words in combination with your drawing are going to give you a fuller picture of what's happening and what it is that you're seeing and observing. Again, if you run out of time to put in all of the limbs, you can leave some of them as outline. It doesn't have to be completed to all the same extent, but as long as you've got the information, down somehow, then that is the main thing. Don't feel that there is a pressure to have always completely finished, perfect drawings. Um, if you try and do that, you won't get anywhere. So if you know that you haven't got so much time, you're doing quick sketches, you're doing notes, and um, having one limb filled in with the spines and the pattern and color if you want to, then that is enough. So you might want to take note of the color of your particular brittle star because they can be all sorts of different colors. They can be brown, purple, red, orange, yellow. There's going to be a lot going on. The diameter for these are up to 2 centimeters, so much smaller than the common sea star we looked at before. Easily missed, so keep your eyes peeled in that rock pool. And the average lifespan is again 5 to 10 years, so very similar. Um, You're going to find brittle stars all around the UK coast in rock pools and in the lower shore and offshore up to depths of 85 meters. They live on the seabed and they raise up their legs to filter feed on plankton and detritus from the water. So again, if you want to make some notes, you can put in some information about the common brittle star. Okay, where are we going next? Aha! We have now come across a shore crab. So this is the crab species that you are most likely to find in the UK. So if you come across a crab in a rock pool or been crabbing on a pier, this is most likely what you have found. Okay, so how to draw a crab. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of shapes. There's lots of colors and textures and parts. And yeah, it can be very complicated. So start with the body. Start with the shell. We've got a face-on view. So we've got some upper shell and we've got some underneath. So what I'm going to do is to give myself a little bit of a vague shape. Let's actually draw it with pencil so you can see what I'm doing. And we'll have some underneath. So I'm going to look at the line along where the eye stalks are placed and draw that in. I think I've made him a little bit too pointy on the outside edge. I say him. I actually don't know whether it's a him or a her. You can tell by looking at the shapes of the carapace underneath. But if you're interested, look, there's something to look up afterwards. Okay, so have a go at breaking this shape down into the smaller sections, almost like scales. They're not scales, but almost like that. So we're breaking that down into shapes. So I'm starting from the outside, working my way in. And I'm going to then use those broken down shapes to help me place where the eye is going to be on each side. So again, there's a little rounded shape in the front here. And then there's an eye stalk coming out and up in here. Rounded shape and eye stalk. In the middle, we have a rounded, almost heart type shape. Okay, on the back of the shell, have a look. Can you see any shaping in here? So I'm going to put a few little curved lines and a little hint of shaping on the back of the shell as far as we can see. And shore crabs are quite spiky. They have sort of upturned spikes on the edge. So have a look at the texture or the shape that you're seeing along the edge. Possibly not the best viewpoint for seeing those spikes, but you can give yourself a bit of an idea of that. And once we've got that, we can then start to think about all of those limbs. So I'm going to, first of all, look at, again, the shaping, like crazy paving we've got here. Where does the limb, the pincer start? Where does it come from, or appear to come from this viewpoint? And I'm going to, again, just get a basic shape to start that off. And then look how thin it gets at the joints. And put in another shape. So this you can break down into smaller shapes if you do want to. So you can come up to this spike and have that as one shape, and then have the claw as a separate shape onto that. And the actual pincer on the end as another shape. We can also divide this into two sections as well. And again, we'll do the same thing on the other side. So have a look. What shape are we seeing here? How does it look different from this angle? Okay, and what I would do from there is to look at the legs and have them drawn in behind. So see how much can you see of each leg? How many are visible from this position? And use what you've already drawn to help you position them. And if there is an overlap where you can't see a part, then take note of that. And again, you can break those legs up into smaller sections. So look at each little shape that makes up the leg. And from this view, we've got quite a bit hidden away. There's a lot going on that we can't see. So can you see that there's sort of two little spines sticking out here? This is the ends of legs. So there we have um, our outline again for our shore crab. And if you had time to go in and put color and texture and all of that, then of course you could spend a lot longer working on a sketch like this. And you would sort of take notice of different things. So the more you look, the more structure you will start to see in the limbs and how rounded they look and how almost like armor plating some of this looks. I enjoy the shapes here where you've got almost like a diamond shape happening, and it's quite rounded on the side. So if you were to put in some shading, if you sort of take note of where this sort of goes round and then you've got some more of a fleshy area underneath. And again, you've got more of a side of this section, a little bit of a central ridge. And you can keep going and adding more and more detail into the just the forms, the shapes, which I find really interesting with the crabs. If you were thinking about maybe getting it to look more textured on the back, you could again do some stippling or little rounded half moon shapes or U shapes. Give yourself a hint of texture in there. And of course, this is again an area where you don't have to do a finished drawing of a whole crab, but you can take little notes of some texture in a little patch, or some areas that you find particularly interesting, do a little bit more shading and detail to. And then you can also, by the side, make some color notes, some swatches of color, to aid you as a bit of a reminder of what kind of colors you're seeing in your little crab friend. So we have shore crab, also sometimes called the green crab. You can probably tell why by the color. And the shell width can be up to 9 centimeters. Okay, so you're going to find these crabs in rock pools, shallow waters. They eat most things. They're not fussy. So anything from seaweed, mussels, barnacles, other smaller crabs, anything they can get hold of, basically. Most common crab, and although they're normally greenish colour, they can also be orange or even red. It does depend on how old the crab is and what time of the year it is, sometimes as to what colour you're going to see. And again, they've got that distinctive pattern of spikes along the outer ridge that they can be identified by. Okay, let's have a look where we're going next. Okay, so we have now barnacles and limpets. So these are the barnacles, and let's have some information about them. So these are arthropods, and they are related to crabs and lobsters. They have very similar looking larvae that swim about, and then as an adult they become stationary, attached to a rock. So interesting little life cycle going on there. And what you're quite often going to see are the shells left over after they have perished, which is like in the lower photograph. But if you're seeing live ones, then you're looking at the photograph above, where they're all closed up. If they are underwater and feeding, then they have almost like little, I'm going to say tentacles, little tentacles coming out to catch food drifting by. So interesting little creatures, and something that you've probably walked past and not really taken much notice of. They're just things on a rock. Well, how interesting can that be? Quite interesting. So again, we could do a little sketch of this cluster. If you are noticing them in real life, you're probably going to see quite a few, and then this is where you've got to decide, well, what do I draw? How many do I draw? And what's most interesting and important to you? So again, you might want to pick and choose how many you want to include. It's quite interesting to see the different sizes. I would imagine that that is indicating age. But again, I don't know for certain. So that's hypothesis I've come up with. And that again is little questions, little um, things that you're noticing as you're drawing, and you can make note of those. What questions do you have? Almost looks like a jigsaw puzzle. The little front closing. So another thing to think about is actually there are a few different species of barnacles, and I don't actually know which these are. um, so that is something that could be explored. That's a different rabbit hole to fall down and do more research on. And if you're anything like me, I always come up with another rabbit hole to go, ooh, don't know about that, let's find out. um, so there's always more to learn. And it doesn't mean that you have to find the answers before you put that in your nature journal. You can um, do your drawings, ask your questions. You don't have to find out absolutely everything about what you're including in your journal. I'm going to put a few sort of hatched lines to try and indicate the sides of the calcareous sort of encasings. So these are our barnacles. Um, so here we go, 2,100 species of barnacle. That's worldwide, that's not UK, but again, there's a lot to try and identify. um, and they're ancient. They are, I think, what you would call a living fossil. So they have existed since the mid-Carboniferous, 325 million years ago. So yeah. um, an ancient life form. Let's have a very quick look at some limpets next. So this is actually a group of aquatic snails. They have a conical shell and a strong muscular foot. So the common limpet, and again, I'm not too sure. The picture I've got, here we go. I'm not too sure. It could be a common limpet, it could be not something else. They tend to go up to 4 centimeters length and live between 10 and 20 years. So here we have our limpet, and again, this is something that you can probably find all over the UK and beyond. And this is sort of a washed up shell. Um, and what I'm going to do is you can draw from the screen. But as something else, if you are picking up shells, and this is something you can nature journal on the beach, you might decide actually, I'm going to draw around the shape of the shell. And that might be something that's a little bit quicker and just as interesting. And you can think about if you've got that shape, in some cases you might actually want to write the information in the shape that you've drawn if your shell is big enough for that. Or you might want to actually draw what you're seeing inside that outline. There is no, again, no rules, no right or wrong. Whatever you are inspired to do. So have a look at the ridges leading up to the point. Have a look at the point of the shell. Is that a different texture to the sides? Have a look at maybe the colors and the rings, if you can see rings around the outside. If you want to bring color into this or add shading, then that is absolutely fine as well. Again, if you are looking at several different varieties, you can also have a think about how they are different. So first thing is, what color are you seeing? um, the next thing is how high up. So you can see I've got one that is extremely shallow and so quite raised. It's small, it's quite raised. This one's kind of in the middle of how wide to tall it is. And this might give me a clue as to what different species I'm seeing. Have a look at the inside as well. Look at that colour and how shiny it is, and compare it to this one. So again, this is also another clue as to what we are looking at, that these are probably a different species to this one, subspecies. So I can, again, just have a think about what I'm seeing. I could make notes about the differences, the similarities of what I'm finding, and the creature themselves you're not likely to see, but if the water comes up high enough, then they are going to be moving about on their rock, feeding from um, anything that attaches to the rock, basically. So these these are um, surrounded by barnacles, and if there's a small barnacle next to it, one of these, then they might fancy a bit of a barnacle snack. But mostly they're going to be eating sort of algae and vegetable matter from the rock. Right. So they have a well, let's say a toothy organ. The proper word is a radula, that they feed um, from, so they can scrape the surface of the rock and get all sorts of um, minerals and uh, anything that's attached to it from the rock. And they, as they are traveling around, they will leave a trail of mucus, which acts a bit like a breadcrumb trail, so they can always find their way home. And what you'll notice is some rocks will have little indented rings, which is their home scar, and they tend to always go back to their home scar even, and reattach themselves. So when the tide comes out, they have a really tight seal that they can attach to, and it doesn't let the air in, so they'll stay wet and they'll stay perfectly safe, and anything that tries to come and eat them will have terrible trouble trying to get them off of that rock. They are very, very strong when they are attached. Um, so there we are. That's our limpets. Um, okay, let's have a little look at whatever finds we might discover on the shoreline. So if we walk along the beach, or even in the rock pools, this one, any ideas what it is? No. So I think I'm not going to tell you. You got to draw it first. It's a mystery. So have a look, or have a look. What are you seeing? What is the shape, first of all? And you've got two, they're the same species, so you can choose which image you want to draw. And just have a look. What are we seeing? We've got a shape, first of all. Where does it get maybe a bit wider? Where is it a bit rounded? We've got almost like a little curved hole at the top, and then this has some strands of curly fronds attached, which I am just going to put a line because it's a mess, a tangled mess of strands. And the same thing at the bottom. It's a little bit hard to see on the top image, so I did include the second image so you can see. Again, we've got more strands coming from the bottom, each side. Something like that. What else can you see? What is interesting to notice? I think the ridges along the outside are quite prominent. So I'm going to draw an extra line coming up the side. These quite thick and opaque in comparison. these outside ridges. And then is this object sort of wrinkled? Is it 3D? um, and a clue is it can be quite flat or it can be quite 3D. So I might put a little indication of some shaping in here. And you'll notice we've got quite a brownish colour, although the top one is kind of covered with green algae. You can still see the brownish colour. So again, you might want to add some colour, do a colour swatch, or just make note of that by the side. So not too complicated. Any ideas now you've drawn what it could be? Ta-da! You've just drawn a baby shark. Don't sing the song. No. So this is the egg case of a nurse hound shark, or also known as a dogfish, or confusingly also a catfish, or a bullhuss. Many names. Um, so this is a reasonably common Atlantic Ocean animal, although it has now been um, graded as vulnerable on the red list, so maybe not as common as it used to be. The adult can grow to a length of 1.6 meters, so reasonable small size, small shark size, reasonable size. Um, it's generally found among rocks or algae at depths of 20 to 60 meters. So you have an illustration of the nurse hound because I couldn't see an image I liked of the whole thing. But it's a really interesting shape to actually draw the adult as well if you want to. So this is a shark that's going to be feeding on other bony fishes, sometimes smaller sharks, crustaceans, and cephalopods. So the females will deposit these large, sort of thick-walled egg cases, two at a time, between March and October, and they secure them to bunches of seaweed with these long fronds. So the eggs can take 7 to 12 months to hatch, quite a long time. And sometimes you will find them washed up on the beach, or washed up into sort of a rock pool area, sometimes quite up on the tide line as well. And sometimes they will be empty when they wash up, and sometimes they won't be empty. So that's why I'm saying they could be quite flat, or they could not be. So they they are something to look out for, and I've chosen this one because this is an image. The top image there is one that I took of one that I found and looked up what it was, and I was, oh, I found a shark. It's so interesting. It's so interesting. But you can find lots of egg cases of sharks and rays of different sorts, and they are quite easy to identify by the shape and the size. So you can record that information, and there are websites that you can use to record your finds, and they're very interested in having public sort of show what it is they found, where they found it, for science. Now here is another mystery. Ooh, what is this?
They're like sea grapes. Like, Like,
Description, yeah, yeah. There is something else called sea grapes, is another term though, and it's not that. So yeah. Um, okay. Again, maybe do a little quick sketch to start off, and I will reveal what it is in just a moment. So this is a bit more complicated. What I would do for a quick sketch of something like this is to do a few of the shapes in the middle, and then just do a general sort of overall outline shape. So you're not filling in every single little piece, but you've got enough information um, to sort of show what it is generally you're looking at. This is quite an interesting one over here. We've got a hole in it that's visible. Maybe have a little look at that. Little hole. And the black bits that have got caught up in it don't really belong to it. So you don't necessarily need to draw those. Just to let you know. So, oh, off the screen there. So you can have a few of those shapes sort of highlighted. You don't have to draw all of them. Right. Now you've had a closer look and drawn a bit. Any thoughts? Ready, steady. Ooh. Did you have any idea? So this is a Commonwealth egg capsule ball. um, and if you didn't know, the Commonwealth is a sort of type of snail, sea snail. Um, so this is a sort of spongy mass, and it can contain up to 2,000 egg capsules, which also contain multiple young, I believe. um, so these do wash up quite often. They are quite spongy textured, and apparently, I don't know whether this is completely true, but I've heard that sailors used to use them as sponges to wash themselves. But yeah, okay. um, okay, so this is what a common whelk looks like. And in fact, I have some examples. So, Commonwealth, they can grow up to 5 to 10 centimeters shell, um, and they're basically very much like a snail. So you can imagine a snail coming out of this shell. Um, They are the largest sea snail species that you're going to find in UK waters. And you can see it is pretty hefty shell. This is something you're not going to be able to sort of walk past on the beach without noticing it. Um, if you can compare it to other things. Um, So, common whelk is a carnivorous creature. It feeds on worms, mollusks, and can use the side of its shell to prise open different shells and bivalves. It can also scavenge on carrion, which it can find by smell. Um, So this is what they look like as a shell that's sort of washed up after the creature's perished. And when you find a live one, they don't look like this. They are not white. They are covered in a brown sort of coating. So can look quite different, really. Okay, so maybe a slightly more complicated shell to draw, but if you wanted to draw some of that, here's one I did earlier, and you can see that what I've done is I've looked for the outside shape first, and then where we've got this pattern of ridges, I've gone in with grey and used a pink, sort of a very light pink to indicate the general colour behind that as well. So I would look for, first of all, the stripes coming down this way, and then the curved stripes coming across this way. And depending on your viewpoint, they can look quite different. So take note of where each stripe or band is coming from and going to, because it's not going to all be the same. It can change slightly. So a little bit of warning when you're drawing. Don't just put in lines, but actually look, where are they coming from and where are they going to? Now this is where I'm going to give you a little extra something that you can try out, which is a bit of fun really, but it adds a bit of extra to your discovery of shells. So in here you can see I've got all sorts of funny patterns. Now the way that I have made those is with plasticine. So this is just a rolled out piece of plasticine. I imagine that you could do the same thing with clay, but plasticine, you can wash it off and use it again many, many times. And so I've got that placed in here. And then what I've done is I've pushed the shell into that, and you can roll it so you can get different views, as it were. You could just press down a single sort of area. You can include different parts of your shell. It can be quite difficult to actually just get the entirety of a shell, so you might end up doing little sections. And then what you're going to do with that is to use some paint, and I think that gouache works quite well. So this is just a cheapish sort of gouache. Actually, that one is a bit dry, so let me get a different one. Where's my brush gone? Okay, so using a soft brush. If you use a hard brush, sometimes you can actually push the impression away. So using a soft brush, what you want to do is to go over the surface. Not too much paint. Try not to make too many big blobs, but you want enough paint that it's going to create a nice print. And actually, at this stage, I think, oh, look at that in the plasticine. That's quite nice. um, so we're going to create something a little bit like that. And then the best thing to use is actually thin tissue paper. So you put that over the top and then gently push that in without pushing too hard, because again, you don't want to accidentally remove your impression, but you need to push it into that impression gently. And as long as you're gentle, you can actually make multiple prints from the same piece of plasticine. And you can generally see how well it's going to come through by how much looks like it's transferred through the tissue paper. So let's see what we've got. There we go. So this is a fun way of creating a little impression of the texture, and actually it can be quite revealing as to what is going on. So this is a different shell. This is a top snail, and it looks a lot more like lace. There's a definite sort of intricate pattern happening in that one. And over here I've done a few more. Let me move that before I get paint everywhere. So we have a limpet shell, and this one I have rolled round to get the entire thing. So pressing it down just like this would not work. What you have to do is have your plasticine flat and then roll round in a circle from the point. And that way you get the entire impression. And the same sort of thing with the cockle shell. Again, you have to have your plasticine flat and roll that. So it's a little bit confused here because I've got almost 2 points because it didn't go back in the same place. But you get the idea. And this one was, again, quite an interesting pattern. We didn't see any sort of cross lines. It was just just circles. It was quite fun. I didn't realize. So again, if you have a little sketch of the shell and the impression that you get from it, you get a more full idea about the textures that you're seeing, and it can help inform your drawing. So a little bit of fun, but sort of good creative fun. Okay, so there were a few, I know we've run out of time, but there are a few more shells in the slides here that you could have a look at and have a go at drawing. So the blue mussel, again, this is where you want to play with colour because that blue is lovely. And just playing with how shiny to get it looking as well. This is something where if you've got watercolors, you could experiment with glazing and building up layers of watercolor to get that luminous kind of feel to it. Oops. Common periwinkle, tiny little shells, but again, the structure and the forms of them are quite interesting to try and get your head around how to draw those shapes, how to draw those 3D forms. Again, interesting little snails. And the last one here is sometimes you come across something you think, oh, that's a shell, and it's actually a fossil. So this is again one of my photographs. I thought, oh, look at this huge shell. Took a photo of it. What I've cut out of this photo is my foot next to it. I need my foot for comparison. I didn't have a banana. Foot comparison size. But yeah, very large shell. And then I later learnt that it is a, well, however you say that, Venicardia planicosta, which is an extinct marine bivalve from 56 to 34 million years ago. So there you go. Sometimes walking on the beach, you come across something that you did not expect to find. And again, the color apparently is a big clue. So if it's completely white like this, it's possible that it is a fossil rather than a recent shell. Okay, so first there's a few links for you that you might find interesting to look up later on. So different websites to find more information on identifying things that you find, seaweed, also looking at tide times and general beach stuff. So hope you have enjoyed watching and drawing along with me. Sorry that we did run a little bit over time today and started a little bit late, but never mind. We got there in the end. So hope you have enjoyed it, and I'll pause the recording here and see how you have done. Thank you for watching. If you liked the workshop, remember to give it a thumbs up. And perhaps let me know about how you nature journal at the beach. If you want to be notified of future videos, be sure to subscribe. And if you would like to join one of my live online workshops, the links to these are below. Stay curious and keep drawing, everyone.